Acts of 2022. This meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee is being conducted both in person and via remote participation. A reminder that persons who would like to listen or view this meeting while in progress may either attend in person at the location above or visit us at our Facebook or YouTube page. May you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilors, we have minutes for approval that are dated May 25th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been made, has been properly seconded by Council President Mark LaPlante. We'll move to a roll call vote. Council De Rosario.
Yes.
Councilor Rodriguez. So we'll mark him as present, I guess, for now. Councilor LaPlante.
Present.
And the chair votes in affirmative, so that okay, yeah, so that drops for now. Let's move to item 177-22, appropriations transfers from capital reserves fund to various capital projects accounts. $1,188,045. Chief Administrative and Finance Officer Mark Ianello. Mr. Ianello.
Yes, Councilor, as explained in my memo, I think I showed the calculation of, this is 1.5% of our prior year's tax levy is required to be put aside in a capital reserve, and this is transfer from the capital reserve to specific capital project accounts so we can accomplish the list of items that are before you.
Great. Councilors, are there any questions?
I don't have a question. This is the capital. It's the capital budget, right?
That's what I believe.
I just want to take this opportunity, Mr. Chairman, just to thank the administration for understanding one of the needs that we have in this chamber, which is the need for cameras. In all honesty, Mr. Chairman, this is something that we need to get to an agreement with LCAT. We need to get that squared away. We need to make sure there's a funding source coming in. But in the meantime, while we're dickering with that, we still have substandard equipment in the chambers, and so it seems like rather than dealing at a moment of principle, we need to fix things so that our residents can see our meetings and we have a much better product to provide to them. So there is money inside the budget to take care of, especially the video equipment that's here. And as you know, last year we changed the audio equipment. This year we'll change the video equipment. So we're making some changes in the right direction. And clearly I heard from the councilors and the mayor's heard from us in this stuff since in the budget. And I just want to thank the mayor's office for making that a priority as part of the capital improvement budget.
Thank you. So I do have a couple of questions as far as some of the things that we are transferring to. It looks like, so all these items new, or were there, or these particular, some of them sort of issues that were in the plan before?
No, these are all new items just for this, for these reserve funds. PAYGO Capital, we refer to them as.
Okay. Can you talk to me about, so I see that ISD has some surveillance cameras. Can you just talk to me about what the need is for that?
They requested 20, and as in the notes you can see it's $4,800 each. They will be cameras that tie into the police department. I guess they've had a few incidences with illegal dumping where they don't have cameras, or they don't have the ability to, the cameras don't have the clarity to get a license plate and so forth. So these cameras work. They do have some of them. I think they have 5 now. I think the ISD director can
Yeah,
speak to it.
so if the director of ISD can come up, and if you can state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, councilors. Mike Amano, Director for Inspectional Services here at City Hall. Just with the cameras, we have 6 total. We actually have 4 that are operating. We just got 2 additional cameras in. They take a little while to get to us once they're ordered. This is a request that I've been putting in for some time to get more cameras. We found it very effective. These are essentially the same cameras that are used by the police department, but they're mobile. So we're able to deploy them in specific locations. If we get a complaint of illegal dumping in one particular place, we can deploy the camera there, leave it there for a while, and we've had some success in deterring people from dumping in specific locations, as well as catching some people dumping. So we're very excited to get 10 additional cameras, and thank the administration, Mayor DePena, for doing that.
Can you talk to us about like, so it sounds like, are all 10 mobile cameras?
Yes, these are all 10 of these are mobile cameras, so they can be moved at different times.
And usually how long do they stay in a location?
All different times. Sometimes it's just a few days, sometimes it could be 6 months. We use both our partnership with the fire department, who moves the cameras, helps us move those cameras, as well as with the police department. We work with the police department for illegal dumping cases, and sometimes they need some strategic location cameras in strategic places as well. So they're constantly moving, but they could be there for 6 months if we have no need to move it.
So I'm going to pause there and see if anyone has questions specifically on ISD and the surveillance cameras. Councilor Rosario?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we need more cameras just to watch people dumping? And how are we going to enforce after that? Because it seems there's a lack of enforcement. So wondering, more cameras, more money, and less enforcement. I mean, honestly speaking, how are we going to do that? Again, more cameras, but are we going to really enforce? Because it seems a lack of enforcement.
I think I heard we have more cameras, but are we really going to enforce? The short answer is yes, we have 10 cameras is great. I think we should have as many cameras as we can afford to get. I love the cameras. I think they work. We do enforce illegal dumping. We have, through the acts of 2016, we have a strong piece of legislation that allows us to prosecute both civilly and criminally up to $10,000. I know Councilor LaPlante himself has been on this, asking me questions about it throughout the year, and has offered to make any adjustments or support any adjustments we need. I had respectfully asked them to let us see how it turns out, and we're still open-minded about changes we need to make. But as I told Councilor LaPlante, we meet on a weekly basis. Chief Vask has been gracious enough to lend us Officer Cano to be part of this illegal dumping program. We meet with Officer Cano as well as City Attorney Tim Hooton. So it's a regular thing. We're constantly watching these cases. They do take time to prosecute, but they're both used, again, not only for the prosecution, but also as a deterrent factor.
Councilor Rosario, do you have any other questions? Does any councilor have any? Go ahead, Councilor Rosario.
No, thank you. That's it.
Okay. Does any councilors have any questions related to ISD and the surveillance cameras? Councilor Giovanni Rodriguez?
Cameras in general?
No, we're just on the ISD surveillance cameras.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Director, is there a number as far as like the number of cases that are filed because of use of these cameras? Because it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like it's more of a deterrent. But I'm not necessarily hearing that there's, what's multiple cases? 3, 2?
I think in the past year, we have, if I can remember correctly, probably close to 20 cases that we have some leads on. Sometimes we don't have,
That came from the cameras, though.
that came from cameras, some, not necessarily all of these cameras, but they're part of it. I can't really tell you which ones came from these. Again, we only have 4. So from the 4 cameras and sometimes from commercial buildings, residential properties. The problem we've always had is it's difficult to identify license plates. So sometimes it takes trying to get interviews, going up the street looking for more cameras. But the cameras, when we have them in place, they work. They're very, as I'm sure the police department can attest, they're very accurate. You know, sometimes lighting is an issue and reading license plates, but they're great cameras and they work.
Thank you. I see Chief Vask. Would you like to speak on this?
Sorry, I just wanted to add that there have been many times where we've had illegal dumping happen. We've had no luck, no cameras in those areas to even start a case with. So I think that has been a problem in the past, which we're trying to avoid now. So if you think about the riverbanks and those vacant lots, those are the types of areas that we try to put cameras in advance and also when we get complaints. But there have been numerous times where we've tried to open up a case only to find out we had no coverage with cameras, and I think that's what we're trying to avoid also.
Thank you. So, Chief, I actually have a couple questions for you. Thank you, Director. So, Chief, so on the police cameras, the 40,000, how many cameras is that?
40,000, if we don't need any infrastructure, meaning servers, at some point when we have a certain number of cameras, we may have to add a server, which is about $25,000, and then we're good for a while, up to about 200 cameras. So I don't believe that's the case, so $40,000 would get us probably 20 cameras.
And how many do we have now?
So the entire citywide network, so that's why I always hesitate to say the police cameras. I think this is a citywide camera project. That's the way I've referred to it always. I say that because LHA now is on board. We partnered with them. They got $250,000 through a grant to put cameras in all new cameras in their housing projects and also in the exteriors, which we can now take advantage of in our cases and also not have to cover those areas with our own money, but we can now spread cameras out other places. The DPW, a while back through the council, put and covered all the parks, 23 parks I believe we have. Maybe there's a little bit more. I might be off on that. They covered that. The water department covered all their water pumping stations and their facilities, 10 or 11, I believe. And there's a couple in dealing with the schools. So that's why I think it's a citywide camera project. The police department certainly, I started that project back in 2018, but it's citywide. So we have in the entire system, and I guess I should have said Museum Square is fully covered, the Buckley Garage is fully covered as well in those projects with cameras. On the system is about 502 cameras now, 342 cameras in the street.
Okay, so this would bring the number to 360 cameras on the street?
Yes.
Okay. One second, Councilor Rodriguez. With these cameras that you have, so I think one of the things that I wonder, I mean, I think the cameras are great when something happens. I do know that, attention is paid to the cameras within the station. But how, is there something to, like, the more cameras you end up having, that there's a certain, like, efficiency that's lost as far as, like, when you're, paying attention to kind of what's going on in the area?
So I think that's a good point. I think it's nearly impossible to watch, obviously. Not nearly, it is impossible to watch 500 different cameras. It really is about when something happens that we have an investigative tool to now start a case on and, again, make an arrest. And we talk about that. We talk about making an arrest to take someone off the street very quickly. Small percentage of people do a high percentage of crime. So if we can solve, back in the day, we weren't even solving where someone would just shoot some shots in the air. They wanted to intimidate someone. Those cases, very rarely did we have any evidence on. There was no victims. There was no witnesses. We'd show up on scene. We'd just get some casings. Generally, there's no fingerprints or anything like that. The case would die right then and there. Now, with video evidence, whether coming to the scene or actually seeing the event, now we can go and work that case and make an arrest there. We've done that many, many times. That simple shots fired incident, later on, if that individual is not brought to justice, that individual is going to end up doing a shooting or something else. So that's kind of the idea behind it. So it is, majority of its use is after the fact. there is some gain in sending a message to people about, you know, when they get arrested, they go to court and they find out there's all this video evidence. Very rarely does someone, you know, want to fight sort of that prosecution when they see it in live and in color. There's also learned behavior as a result of that, especially what we found with the gang members. They now know that the city has a very complex system and they're hesitant to try to do something. Not to say that they're not going to do something, but we're finding now is more of our violence when we have it is from out-of-towners. Our last homicide that we had on Essex Street, out-of-towners. Another shooting that we had on Newbury Street, out-of-towners. Those individuals don't necessarily know about the cameras. However, we're quick to bring them to justice. And, you know, we'll be announcing very shortly some successes in that regard as well. All of our cases, all of our statistics and crime are above the national average in their clearance rates because primarily, you know, we have leads now that we never had in the past. So I know another question is always raised is when is enough cameras? I would say this, I'm not aware of in the 3-4 years now that we started this project, citizens bringing to our attention their issues regarding cameras. People kind of just seem to go day to day with their lives. So that tells me two things. One, they're not necessarily worried about it. It's just part of society because as we know, cameras are everywhere, not just the ones we have. ATMs, stores, businesses, a lot of times we utilize them as well. But also that, you know, they're not feeling like that they're affected in a negative way with cameras. As a matter of fact, many of the citizens would go to meetings, and quite frankly, many of the councilors have asked for additional cameras, have asked for additional coverage in different areas that we don't necessarily cover now. I don't know what that number is. In my opinion, enough is never enough, because if we can solve one more crime as a result of a camera that we didn't have, that to me is a win.
Yeah, and I think I'm not saying that we should have no more cameras, but I also, you know, the idea of having like a camera on every block
Sure.
does sound a little off to me. I think when we approached this this project, the idea was to have cameras on, you know, especially the locations where there's a lot of crime that occurs, like these sort of like hot areas, and I think that's something that everyone could agree with. I think the idea of connecting our systems with all the other cameras within the different other city departments, I think that that makes perfect sense to me as well. But I think that there should be some type of project plan as to what we think is what we need, and that, you know, if 10 years from now I'm walking around and I'm literally seeing a camera on every block, like, I don't know, that would feel a little weird. And I would say, I don't think the people that would be worried about this are not worried, because I think that first year we did a pretty good campaign, I think you as well, in ensuring people that these cameras, not just that they weren't intrusive, that they weren't necessarily, you know, folks weren't going to use them incorrectly. So I think that definitely helped, but it's definitely something that I think we should just keep in mind.
Well, I would just, before we take another question, I would just add that I don't envision a day or a period of time where A, we're going to commit the funds, or B, we're going to have a camera on any block. I think we are very aware of where those cameras need to be, and certainly, to your point, it's really statistics driven. There really is no campaign to put a camera on every block. That's not my mindset. I don't think we come down here with the same kind of ask for finances that we did initially on in the project, and I think we've been really good about incorporating the other departments to do that work as well. I think we're at a pretty good place now, and I think from here on, it's just more about dialing in some of those hotspot areas, as you said. And again, I don't envision putting them on every block, and certainly in some of the neighborhoods that, quite frankly, we never go to because there's really no issues.
Okay. As you're placing these cameras, I think in the South Florence West area, I think that there's, like, you know, I remember in the past there were these issues that would, you know, come up, and I was always surprised that there was nothing, well, at least where things were occurring, there were no cameras there. So hopefully you can keep that in mind. But I just want to jump into a few questions. Councilor Rodriguez, did you want to ask some questions about the cameras? Yes. Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, last night there was an event happening around Lawrence Street. Is that right, or that's just rumors?
No, we had an individual shot in the leg on Lexington Street, right off of Lawrence Street.
That was it was a motor, or it was just somebody getting shot?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Councilor Rodriguez, can you repeat the last part?
It was a motor, or somebody just getting
No,
shot?
not a homicide. Just an individual, two individuals arguing, another individual shot an individual in the leg. No homicide.
How helpful the camera were last night?
I would say gave us some leads. It didn't cover the initial shooting, but certainly gave us some information about coming and going of vehicles into that area that we can now follow up on. Where in the past, quite frankly, we wouldn't have had that.
So did the camera help?
Yes.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
Councilor LaPlante?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to applaud you for your comments. You were saying what I was thinking, and I don't think we've got a problem in this city, but we should always be on guard in the future. We're all going to change. Some of us are going to rotate out, whether it's a chief or a counselor, whoever. We're all rotating out at some point. We need to consistently be mindful that this is government who is now having cameras. This is not the store 24. This is not the doorbell ring at someone's private property. This is the government who has cameras located around, and we have a higher level of responsibility with those cameras, more so than the cameras that are on private residences or other private establishments. So I want to commend you for those comments. I think you were saying what I was thinking, and even though I don't think that's a problem now, I'm very confident that that this government is being responsible in the way that it deploys the cameras and the way that it is accessing and utilizing the information. We should always be on heightened guard, that we're mindful that we can certainly go off the rails very quickly if we're not being responsible with that, and that's for the sake of our residents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Rodriguez?
Is Council President on the table? I can't see.
Councilor Rodriguez, can you repeat that?
Part of this meeting today.
He is.
I think that we're going to have to check the rule that allow the Council President to fulfill people that are just for the quorum purpose, not for the meeting, because we have quorum right now. We're going to have to check on that because, I mean, as far as I understand that rule, is only allow the Council President to be present if any other councilor, for the purpose of the quorum, if two councilors are present, not three.
I hear you, Councilor Rodriguez. The Council President said that he's going to look up the rule. In the meantime, I'll continue with the questions. And the Council.
Before we start the meeting, we're going to have to check on that and send that over to City Attorney.
I hear you, Councilor Rodriguez. So I think Council President, perhaps can send out an email shooting that information to us. But thank you, Chief. So my next question is somebody from DPW here? Thank you. If you can state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon. Lance Hamill, CIP, City of Lawrence, DPW as well. Thank you for
Lance, what's your title again?
Capital Project Manager, acting.
All right, thank you. Can you talk to me about, so there's two things. There's a couple of big ticket items on the DPW. We got dump trucks, building repairs, and street sweepers. Can you talk to me about the dump trucks?
Yeah. So they're about $80,000 a piece, depending on the market. That's going to include the plows as well as the dump body and sander. They are very expensive. The need for them is because DPW has filled in a lot of vacancies in the past year. And so now we notice there's a problem with, tandem. They only hold 2 people. So therefore, sending out a crew in different directions, it requires that.
So what are the dump trucks used for?
From snow removal, salt and sanding, to carrying the trailer that carries lawnmowers and all the equipment for DPW. When we sweep and we're on the south side of the city, instead of having the sweeper drive all the way back, they dump it into the dump body, and the dump body comes back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Building repairs, what buildings are we repairing?
Lots of city repairs. City buildings need a lot of repairs. We have numerous
No,
amounts.
I understand, but there's $100,000 here. I'm assuming that the $100,000 just wasn't picked out of a hat, so,
I don't know the exact specifications.
Okay.
Glenn Gary would have to say that. I don't know if we have, I know
Director
there's just.
Anel, do you happen to have that information by any chance?
Yeah, the part of it was for the roofs at the central fire station, but we put it in the DPW budget, so if they can repair the roofs for less than what the fire chief thinks, but that's what was that was the initial request was from the fire department. So I placed it in DPW so they can do fire roof repairs and any other fire building that might need it.
I'll read it later. Okay, if we could get, before our next meeting, just an email, just kind of stating what those, so roof, $40,000, right? Like, so just so we know where the $100,000 is coming from before it comes to the city council meeting?
Kind of tell you, the roof is 150,000 was the request. We only had 100, so we're hoping to get 100,000 worth of repairs done.
Okay,
Yep.
so it's not building repairs, it's repairing the roof for,
Well, and that was the initial request, was the roof at 65 Lowell Street. The request is 150,000. We didn't quite have 150, so we had 100. We're trying to split all this money up. So hopefully they can take care of the roof. And if the roof does not need 150,000 worth of work, maybe it's a $10,000 patch. They'd have 90,000 available to do other repairs to city buildings because there's a substantial need. We don't have a repair budget in our operating budget, if you will. It's very limited.
okay, I mean, it's understood. I think it makes it a little harder for us to be able to discuss to our constituents where the money is going if there's not some specificity that is given on this. So I appreciate that, understanding that 100,000 right now, it looks like it's going to be going to fix the roof of the fire department. I doubt that something that's being put to the cost 150,000 for that to go down substantially. But if the case, something like that does happen, I think, not that it's a super request from me, but I think it'd be great just keeping the council informed when money that we're saying is going to one thing, that it might go to another thing. Because right now, even though it says building repairs, it's repairing that particular building. But moving on to the street sweepers, how many street sweepers do we currently have?
We have 2
Two.
currently.
So can you just talk about like the importance of getting 2 more?
So the importance is time that they're down. So having 4 go out would be wonderful, but to maintain them and to have little parts go down, and then with the demand that we have right now with ordering parts and waiting, sometimes we've noticed we've been down a month and a half, and it could be a $50 part. We had a hydraulic part just recently, well, a month ago, go down, and the part was $300, and we were down for almost a month. So, downtime is very important, especially in the spring, summer, and fall, to really hit the streets hard with those sweepers. So we can't afford that downtime.
How long would it take to get them?
Once the order is going to be probably 8 months to a year.
Okay. Thank you so much. One second. Are there any other questions from Mr. Nell? No? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So my last question is for Chief Moriarty. Chief, if you can just state your name for the record, please.
You got it right, Chief Moriarty.
Chief, can you just talk to us about the fire prevention vehicles?
Yes, we are hurting for fire prevention vehicles. As you remember correctly, the last time I was up here, I was questioned why I was paying the electrical inspector to use his car because he's using his car. So we're trying to keep our fire prevention vehicles up and running. We've lost a few this year. We just lost one recently to rot and mechanical. It's just too old and too costly to repair. So we've put in for, well, I actually put in for 3. So not going to get 3, but we're going to try to get as many as we can to keep them up. We have the inspectors route every day, plus they come in for callbacks for fires investigations. So we need quite a few vehicles, actually.
Are there any questions for the chief? None. Thank you, Chief. Councilors, are there any questions at large? Seeing no questions, is there a motion? Councilor Rosario.
I have a question. Well, no, it's not a question.
Go ahead, Councilor Rosario.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am a supporter of allocating the $8,000 for the city clerk, okay? But I would like to make a request on that if it's possible.
Go ahead, Councilor Rosario.
I will request that the city engineer provide assistance to the clerk office with determining the most efficient layout of the quorum space, accommodating the desk and workstation that will meet the best of work for the staff and also to provide service to the customers.
Okay, Councilor Rosario, so I can't see someone from DPW here that would be able to address that. So would you like to send correspondence to the city engineer stating that request? Councilor Rosario, were you able to hear me?
Yes, I would like to send that request, please. I would like to send correspondence for that.
Okay, so we have a motion to send correspondence to the city engineer to ask that the city engineer works with the city clerk to ensure that when placing the office desks and workspaces, that they are done in an efficient manner. Am I stating that correctly, Councilor Rosario?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. Layout of the quorum space to accommodate the desk and workstation that will meet both the staff needs and also our customers. Okay,
to ensure that the accommodations of desks and the layouts are done in that it's efficient for staff. Were you able to get that? Yeah? Okay. All right, so there's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Council President. We'll do a roll call vote. Council President?
Yes.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilor Rosario?
Yes.
And the chair votes in affirmative. Councilor Rosario, do you have any questions to the city clerk or any other questions?
No, that's all. Thank you very much, Chair.
All right, thank you. Councilors, is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we send this document up to the full council with a favorable recommendation.
There's been a motion to send this to the full council with a favorable recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Councilor De Rosario. We'll move to a roll call vote. Councilor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilor De Rosario?
Yes.
Councilor LaPlante?
Yes.
And the chair votes in affirmative. Thank you. We now move on to the next item. We're now moving on to item 178-22, year-end transfers between departmental accounts. Director Ianello.
Yes, councilors, annually we come, or at the end of every year, we come to the city council to transfer funds between accounts sometimes within departments, sometimes between departments, to get them through the year. So before you, there's a number of transfer requests. We've broken them down into 9 different entries. The first entry is primarily for the DPW department. They have, obviously, they have some solid waste disposal costs and some electricity shortfalls, and we were able to make that up within the operating budget of the DPW and within other accounts within the city to accommodate that request. So it prevents us from coming and using free cash. The second entry was a minor adjustment for the mayor's office, help with their salaries. The third entry was transfers within the police accounts, mainly for fuel and repairs. The fourth entry was for really just transferring the debt service paid for out of the general fund and transferring it to the parking enterprise fund so we can keep track of it there. The fifth entry is a slight adjustment for the city clerk and for their salaries. The sixth adjustment was to transfer funds from, they didn't have any court judgments or settlements this year, so they'd like to transfer funds into their legal services account to help with their legal bills. The fire department had some transfers within their accounts, and the library had a transfer in journal entry number 8 with their accounts. And lastly is the parking enterprise fund. And again, that's primarily to just transfer the debt service from the general fund over to the parking enterprise fund to keep track of it there. Because when the parking comes back to full, when the parking garage comes back to full tilt, we'd like the revenues of the parking garage to pay for the debt service on the parking garages. In the last heretofore, we've been subsidizing the parking enterprise fund out of the general fund. So those are the year-end transfers that we're requesting to clear all the departments, so we'll end the year without any deficits.
Councilors, are there any questions? Councilor Plant?
Thank you. On the parking enterprise fund, again, we're looking for, I call it a bailout, but help subsidize the cost over there. Can you give me, through you, Mr. Chairman, a bit of a feel as to what kind of trend lines are we doing with that? I know that we've not been picking up money from a variety of different places. Is this a little bit more, a little bit less? Where are we in the spectrum of this particular account?
Well, we didn't have to bail out when we passed our FY22 budget. I don't have it with me, but when we passed our FY22 budget, we included in that budget was a request to fund approximately, I think it was approximately 300, maybe it was, Ramona, do you remember, was it 300 or 400,000? 450 from the general fund to subsidize the parking enterprise fund last year, and the current year we're in FY22. And that was because the Museum Square garage was down, and primarily we had to pay for a shuttle to keep people from the Buckley over there. That was an expensive shuttle. So in FY23, we're hoping the garage gets back up to full tilt, and in FY23, there shouldn't be a subsidy. Other than the debt service, we probably will still have to subsidize the debt service until all the parking gets back to normal.
All right, councilors, are there any other questions? If there aren't any other questions, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to send this up to the full council with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second? It's been seconded by Councilor Rosario. So I'll call the motion. Councilor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilor Rosario?
Yes.
Councilor Plant?
Yes.
And the chair votes in affirmative. All right, we move on to item 179-22, appropriations transfers from free cash to various reserve funds totaling $6,472,982.
Yes, Counselor, this is a transfer, as you suggested, of roughly $6.5 million. Primarily, the largest reason for this, or the second largest reason this year, is to clean out our snow and ice deficit for the year. We spent approximately $2,072,000 in snow and ice, so that'll wipe out our snow and ice deficit. And the remaining balances are to transfer some free cash into our reserves that we do annually. The OPEB trust fund, we normally transfer $100,000. We're increasing that to $500,000. Try and keep our rating agencies a little happier because they'd like to see us funding it a little higher. So we're suggesting $500,000. We're putting $200,000 in our compensated absence reserve fund. That's to pay for severance packages when employees leave, so that helps the operating budget. Workers' comp claims reserve fund, we're putting $100,000 into that fund, and that helps with workers' comp claims. In the line of injured in the line of duty reserve fund is $100,000 we're suggesting to go in there, and that's for injured on duty claims for police and fire. And then last year we transferred $1 million into the stabilization reserve fund. We'd like to transfer $3 million in there this year. That would bring the total to actually $3.2 million. And then we're asking for $500,000 to start setting aside for reserve for litigation. We only have $75,000 in that account, so we'd like to, just in case we want to start building that account out, I'd like to see it up around $1 million in case the city did have any judgments or settlements against us. We'd have at least some money set aside to handle it. So that's the intent of the $500,000. So those are the transfers that we're requesting for this year.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Make a motion to send this up to the full council with a favorable recommendation.
There's been a motion to send this to the full council with a favorable recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Councilor De Rosario. We'll move to a roll call vote. Councilor De Rosario.
Yes.
Councilor Rodriguez. Councilor Rodriguez. President LaPlante.
Yes.
And the chair votes in affirmative. Go ahead, Councilor Rodriguez. Would you like to state your vote?
I vote present.
So Councilor Rodriguez votes present. All right, we now move on to item 180-20 FY23, annual authorization of revolving funds. Mr. Iannello?
Yes, councilors, it's the renewal. We come back every year with there's 6 revolving funds that require your approval annually. The Bellevue Cemetery, the Council on Aging Revolving Fund, the Recreation and Park Self-Supporting Service Revolving Fund, the Veterans Memorial Stadium Revolving Fund, the Library Revolving Fund, and then the PEG Access Cable-related fund for the school department. Those are the 6 reserves that require your approval. Included in your package is an order for each of them, and we're required to put in the order the approximate or the limit on the annual expenditures in each fund. So in the Bellevue Cemetery, we're suggesting a limit of $95,000. Council on Aging is $150,000. The Park and Recreation doesn't require to put a limit in there. They only have about 10 or 20,000. The Veterans Memorial Stadium, we have a limit of $100,000 for that one. The library has a $20,000 expenditure limit, and the PEG Access does not require an expenditure limit as well. But we do have, they have appropriated approximately $357,000 last year.
Mr. Iannello, can you talk to us a little bit about what the PEG Access and Cable Fund is?
That's the, as you guys are aware, the LCAT receives the funds from the, for the PEG, Public Education and Government Programming. That's the PEG. Those are the PEG amounts that are charged to all the cable users. And the P and the G goes to the public, and the government goes to the LCAT, and then the education piece goes to the school system. They have a director, and they handle their own distribution, which is, as I mentioned, approximately $350,000. And they've been handling it since the cable contract was signed 15 years ago or 12 years ago, whatever it is. And so they manage their educational channel.
Council, are there any questions? President LaPlante?
If we don't authorize the expenditures for any one of these or all of them, what happens?
Well, in essence, the revolving funds would be, if the revolving funds are not renewed, the revolving funds would go back into the general fund.
So, I mean, we're obviously looking at the PEG monies that are that you mentioned, local cable access. So the question here is that we are allowing those individuals at LCAT to spend up to $357,980.
No, this has nothing to do with LCAT.
Okay.
This is,
Help
this is the educational piece goes to the the school department.
So this is just,
So this goes directly from the cable companies to the school department. It does not go to LCAT.
so this is just the E part of that?
Right, this is the
Okay.
E part, goes directly to the school, doesn't go through LCAT.
My apologies, that's
yeah.
clear now, thank you.
Council, are there any other questions? If not, is there a motion?
Motion to send this up to the full council with a favorable recommendation.
There's been a motion to send this to the full council with a favorable recommendation. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Councilor De Rosario. We move to a roll call vote. Councilor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilor De Rosario?
Yes.
President LaPlante?
Yes.
Chair votes in affirmative. We now move to item 184-22. Excuse me, ma'am. Can you come up for 1 second? Can you state your name for the record, please?
Sure, Marcial Jordan, CFO for Lawrence Public Schools.
So, Ms. Jordan, so there are other items here that are on the agenda, and I just want to make sure that in case counselors do have any questions or they want to bring something up. So we are going to be moving a little bit out of order. Counselors, is there a motion to take item 173-22, ARPA funding from tabled matters?
So moved.
So there's a motion, is second. So there's been a motion to take item 173-22, ARPA funding from tabled matters on the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Councilor Rodriguez. We move to a roll call vote. Councilor De Rosario.
Yes.
Councilor Rodriguez. Councilor Rodriguez. We couldn't hear you, Councilor. President LaPlante.
Yes.
And the chair votes in affirmative. All right, thank you. So when we put down ARPA funding, I know we had a discussion about, what was the abbreviation, URSA?
ESSER.
ESSER. There we go. There were several questions that we asked about defining that more. Has that information been sent to us?
So I was under the understanding that the superintendent did submit some information to you, actually specifically today. I don't exactly know what exactly she sent over to you, so I would have to connect with her before I'm able to exactly state what was said.
So I think that, well, thank you for that information being sent. One of the things that I think that we've been, that we've said frequently and I know I've said it, you know, a few times where LPS has put up, has given us certain items, and I think it is important that information like this is given to us not on the day of.
Sure.
Because, you know, for example, that would have been something great for us to discuss today, and that's definitely not something that we have, well, I'm going through this, and I don't see anything from the superintendent's office.
Sure.
So, yeah, so what I would say, well, that's very unfortunate, because like today is the budget meeting where we would have discussed this. That means that the next time that we discuss this would be in front of the full council while we're talking about the budget. And that's not where I think that discussion should take place.
Sure.
I think when we left the meeting, the last meeting that we had, we were, you know, while we didn't say that the information didn't need to be rushed, as in like the next day, we did believe that we would be getting something, you know, this week. So I will say that I'm disappointed that we can't discuss this more, but I'll leave that to councilors. I don't know if you guys have any questions or statements. Councilor De Rosario?
We did not get it. Well, I did not get any information. I cannot speak with all of us. But once again, I do apologize how I'm gonna sound, but I wasn't expecting the information to get through us because we used to this. And that's what I've been talking about all the time. We're used to this. And they might will show up with the information 15 minutes prior to our meeting. That's disappointing. And that's basically what the LPS has been doing through all these years. When a city requests information, they don't provide in a timely manner. It's like they don't want us to check the information at the time. They don't want to give us the time to go through the information. And it's very disappointing. I just want to add that. Very disappointing. Once again, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Rosario. Are there any other questions from councilors? None. When can we expect this information?
So my apologies that it wasn't sent, and I will connect with the superintendent first thing tomorrow morning to ensure that we send it before you're voting on the full budget.
So I think the key here is not before the vote. I think it's this week.
Okay.
At this point, because I think that councils need sufficient time to look through, to understand, and to figure out whether or not we want to spend time and question on this at the budget meeting, or whether this could wait until the next budget committee. What I will say is that if this is presented to us, let's say Wednesday evening or Thursday morning of next week, you know, basically less than 24 hours before the budget meeting, I think that would be, at least I would find that a little bit unprofessional. So I hope that we can get that information as soon as possible. And thank you for staying. I just wanted to make sure that I brought you up, because I think that if you would have left and then this would have came up, you know, folks would have been like, what's going on? So I didn't want to blindside you on that. And at least we had the conversation, and you know, hopefully councilors will see this at least tomorrow. But do express that I think all of us at the least are disappointed that that information isn't here with us today. Thank you, and I hope you have a good evening.
Thank you. I understand, and I apologize again.
Yeah. Okay, so we are moving on to item 184-22, approve the resolution for a Land and Water Conservation Fund grant award to the city for Phase 3 renovations to O'Connell Park. And we have manager Susan Fink.
Good evening, Councilors. Sue Fink, Manager of Financial and Administrative Services in the Office of Planning and Development. In February of 2021, the City of Lawrence, in partnership with Groundwork Lawrence, submitted an application to the state for a Land and Water Conservation Fund grant for Phase 3 renovations at O'Connell Park. This grant is actually through the National Park Service, and it took quite some time for the grant to be awarded. During meetings with the Neighborhood Association for Phase 2 renovations, we had polled the residents about what type of amenities they would like to see in Phase 3. Based on this feedback, a design firm was retained for this project. We had a site meeting in October of 2021 and showed the attendees what the designers had come up with and solicited additional feedback. We just had another meeting on May 19th to gather additional feedback. The plan work includes creating an expanded all abilities playground that makes the space accessible for those with visible and invisible disabilities. The proposed size and layout of the playground creates simple and intuitive play opportunities for a wide variety of body types, sizes, ages, and abilities. Another way the project creatively addresses accessibility challenges is by proposing a landform bridge connecting to the second floor of the bandstand. The total estimated budget for this renovation is $1,190,000. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is a reimbursable grant that reimburses 50% of the costs. So we applied for $595,000 in Land and Water Conservation funds, which will be used in conjunction with Community Development Block Grant funds and an allocation of free cash. The project timeline is for us to finish the design work in FY23 and begin construction also in FY23, with the project completing in FY24. I actually have the authorization to expend the grant funds on the upcoming City Council agenda, so you'll be seeing me again very shortly talking about this project. So tonight, I'm here before you to have the resolution that has to be approved by the City Council. This is the same resolution that we put before you for all the park projects, and basically what it says, that we have the authorization to apply for this grant, and then we have funds allocated for this project. So I'm requesting that you send this to the full council for a submission to the state, and if you could waive the 30-day period. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Fink. Councilors, any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Make a motion to send this up to the full council with a favorable recommendation and encourage the waiving of the 30 days.
There's been a motion. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Councilor Del Rosario. We move to a roll call vote. Councilor Rodriguez. Councilor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilor Del Rosario. President LaPlante.
Yes.
Listen, no. It's just we say counselor, so it's throwing me off. I'm not the clerk, so yeah. No, it's not getting old. It's not getting old. Listen, when I say counsel, I'm still not getting it wrong, Mark. Chair votes in affirmative. We move on to the next item.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you, and thank you for all the amazing work you do. I feel like I am extremely happy when I see you here, because it means that, there's something new. There's we're renovating something or creating something, and you're always bringing us money. So that's always good when you're bringing money in instead of spending it, right?
It's the best part of my job.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Now we move on to item 191-22, order to expend grant funds earmarked from DCR for additional work at the rail trail, $500,000. Daniel McCarthy, Acting Planning Director. Mr. McCarthy isn't here. Councilors.
I could do my best to talk about this if you'd like, councilors.
So councilors, so I think that we have two options. We can ask questions to Ms. Fink, and she will answer them to the best of her ability, or we could table the item. Or we can move it up, whatever you guys choose. Councilors?
To send it to the full council pending the information that it will be provided by McCarthy with no recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's a motion to send this to the full council without a recommendation. So as a committee report, Councilor?
Yes, as a committee report.
So send it to the full council as a committee report, and we'd be expecting Mr. McCarthy there to give his presentation on that. And it's been seconded by Council Del Rosario. We move to a roll call vote. This discussion, Council President.
Ms. Fink? Nice try. I know that
Yes.
I know this is not your project, and I know that you're trying to do your best. Just as much as you know, just a very, very, very broad overview what this is about.
Sure, that would be my
Very
pleasure.
general terms.
The city was very fortunate that Representative Frank Moran was able to secure a $500,000 earmark for the rail trail project. And what this funding is going to be used for is to do some vegetation removal along the rail trail, starting at the Methuen line and working towards the south. Trash cleanup, installation of fencing, security cameras, and also to engage the community in the project.
Councilor Rodriguez, did you have a question? Okay, I think he's saying no. So we move to a roll call vote. President LaPlante,
Yes.
Councilor Del Rosario,
Yes.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fink.
You're welcome.
We move to the next item, item 196-22, retained earnings transfer, $555,000 from airports retained earnings certified by the DOR to be used for capital improvement projects. We have Airport Manager, Mr. Miller here.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. President, Mike Miller, Airport Manager. I'm here this evening in support of the request to transfer $555,000 from the Airport Department's retained earnings in order to fund the local share of two capital improvement projects. These projects are on the airport's AIP-CIP list with the federal and state regulatory authorities, FAA and MassDOT Aeronautics. As such, they will provide 95% of the funding for the projects, but the airport must fund the remaining 5%. I'm seeking authority to transfer $495,000 to be the 5% match for a taxiway project. Under current design standards, for safety reasons, taxiways cannot leave from a parking ramp and directly go out to a runway. So the FAA has asked us to remove taxiway Delta, and in doing so, we would then have to connect taxiway Charlie across the airport to another taxiway so that aircraft can taxi from the south side of the airport to the north side and vice versa. So it's anticipated that project will be $9,900,000 for construction and engineering. We've applied for and hope to receive federal and state grants, but in order to make sure we have our 5% ready, I am here now asking for a transfer out of our retained earnings so we can put that into a projects account. The second project, again, safety-related, is a navigation easement project. The FAA funded, as well as the state, and we paid for locally, for an obstruction analysis around the airport, and it was determined that there are penetrations into the approach surfaces in the airspace of the airport that are off airport. They're located in the town of North Andover, and so we will have to engage in negotiations with those property owners to acquire an easement over their property that would permit us to cut that obstruction. May not be a total removal, it may be just a topping of a tree, but we'll have to engage in that negotiation and discussion, and that's anticipated to cost approximately $1.2 million, again, because it's on our AIP and CIP at 90% federal funded, 5% state, and then the remaining 5% has to come from the airport. So I'm asking or seeking $60,000 to be transferred into a project account for that project as well.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. So, is it, how many trees is it that's going to cost something million dollars?
There are
Because you said it's not cutting the trees, it's just trimming the top.
It could be both. It could, depending upon the height and location of the tree. One homeowner has an exorbitant amount on Bradford Street. The others may have one or two located. There's probably 7 properties in question. But it's both the acquisition of the easement, which means we have to pay the homeowner for that right, and the ultimate removal of the trees as well, which would be a contract with a tree removal company. But it's one particular homeowner has an inordinate amount, probably 20 to 30 pine trees that are identified as penetrations. The others, it's 1 or 2 trees here that we can just top off, and it shouldn't be that bad. But worst-case scenario, they're expecting they're going to have to enter into lengthy negotiations for these easements, and they're going to run in perpetuity because we have to maintain that space. So they're anticipating property values being higher, that it could cost upwards of $1.2 million.
Okay, councilors, any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Motion to send this up to the full council with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Rosario, I'm hearing that you said that you did say second. Okay, great. We move to a roll call vote. Councilor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilor Rosario.
Yes.
President LaPlante.
Yes.
And the chair votes in affirmative. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for
Thank
the
you,
work you
Mr.
did.
Chair. Thank you, councilors.
Councilors, there are no other items. There are no other new items. Is there any other motions?
Motion to adjourn.
There's been a motion to adjourn by Councilor Rosario. It's been seconded by Councilor Rodriguez. We move to a roll call vote. President LaPlante.
Yes.
Councilor Rosario.
Yes.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Yes.
And the chair votes in affirmative. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.